Hello everyone, Dr. Mad here. Let's get mad about Macbeth. So in this lesson, we are going to look at Act 3, Scene 1. And the summary is that it begins with a short soliloquy from Banquo that Macbeth now has what the witches predicted, but that he's done something wrong to achieve it. Macbeth invites Banquo to a feast, a dinner, and then Macbeth soliloquy in which he reveals that he does not feel safe as king. And then Macbeth hires murderers to kill Banquo and his son Florence. So let's start by listening to the scene.
Thou hast it now, King, Cawdor, Glamis, all as the weird women promised. And I fear thou playedst most foully for it. Yet it was said, it should not stand in thy posterity, but that myself should be the root and father of many kings. If there come truth from them, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine, why, by the verities on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well, and set me up in hope? But hush, no more.
Here's our chief guest.
If he had been forgotten, it had been as a gap in our great feast and all thing unbecoming.
Tonight we hold a solemn supper, sir, and I'll request your presence.
Let your highness command upon me, to the which my duties are with the most indissoluble tie for ever knit.
Ride you this afternoon?
Aye, my good lord.
We should have else desired your good advice, which still hath been both grave and prosperous in this day's council, but we'll take tomorrow. Is far you ride?
As far, my lord, as 'twill fill up the time twixt this and supper. Go not my horse the better, I must become a borrower of the night for a dark hour or twain.
Fail not our feast.
My lord, I will not.
We hear our bloody cousins are bestowed in England and in Ireland, not confessing their cruel parricide, filling their hearers with strange invention. But of that, tomorrow, when therewithal we shall have cause of state craving us jointly. Hie you to horse, adieu till you return at night. Goes Fleance with you?
Aye, my good lord, our time does call upon us.
I wish your horses swift and sure of foot, and so I do commend you to their backs. Farewell. Let every man be master of his time till 7 at night to make society the sweeter welcome. We will keep ourself till supper time alone. While then, God be with you. Sirrah, a word with you. Attend those men our pleasure.
They are, my lord, without the palace gate.
Bring them before us.
My lord.
To be thus is nothing but to be safely thus. Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind he hath the wisdom that doth guide his valour to act in safety. There is none but he whose being I do fear. And under him my genius is rebuked, as it is said Mark Antony's was by Caesar. He chid the sisters when first they put the name of king upon me and bade them speak to him. Then prophet-like they hailed him father to a line of kings. Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown and put a barren scepter in my gripe, thence to be wrenched with an unlineal hand, no son of mine succeeding. If it be so, for Banquo's issue have I filed my mind. For them, the gracious Duncan, have I murdered. Put rancors in the vessel of my peace only for them, and mine eternal jewel given to the common enemy of man to make them kings, the seeds of Banquo kings. Rather than so, come fate into the list, and champion me to the utterance. Who's there?
Those men, my lord, that you did bid me bring.
Now go to the door and stay there till we call. Was it not yesterday we spoke together?
It was, so please your highness.
Well then, now have you considered of my speeches? Know that it was he, in the times past, which held you so under fortune, which you thought had been our innocent self. This I made good to you in our last conference, passed in probation with you. How you were borne in hand, how crossed the instruments, who wrought with them, and all things else that might to half a soul and to a notion crazed say, thus did Banquo.
You made it known to us.
I did so, and went further, which is now our point of second meeting. Do you find your patience so predominant in your nature that you can let this go? Are you so gospelled to pray for this good man and for his issue, whose heavy hand hath bowed you to the grave and beggared yours forever?
We are men, my liege.
Aye, in the catalogue ye go for men, as hounds and greyhounds, mongrels, spaniels, curs, shuffs, water-rugs, and demi-wolves are clept all by the name of dogs. The valued file distinguishes the swift, the slow, the subtle, the housekeeper, the hunter, every one according to the gift which bounteous nature hath in him closed, whereby he does receive particular addition from the bill that writes them all alike, and so of men. Now, if you have a station in the file, not i' the worst rank of manhood, say it, and I will put that business in your bosoms, whose execution takes your enemy off, grapples you to the heart and love of us, who wear our health but sickly in his life, which in his death were perfect.
I am one, my liege, whom the vile blows and buffets of the world have so incensed that I am reckless what I do to spite the world.
And I another, so weary with disasters, tugged with fortune, that I would set my life on any chance to mend it, or be rid on't.
Both of you know Banquo was your enemy.
True, my lord.
So is he mine, and in such bloody distance that every minute of his being thrusts against my nearest of life. And though I could with bare-faced power sweep him from my sight and bid my will avouch it, yet I must not, for certain friends that are both his and mine, whose loves I may not drop, but wail his fall, who I myself struck down. And thence it is that I to your assistance do make love, masking the business from the common eye, for sundry weighty reasons.
We shall, my lord, perform what you command us.
Though our lives...
Your spirit shine through you. Within this hour, at most, I will advise you where to plant yourselves, acquaint you with the perfect spy of the time, the moment on't, for it must be done tonight, and something from the palace, always thought that I require a clearness. And with him, to leave no rubs nor botches in the work, Fleance, his son that keeps him company, whose absence is no less material to me than is his father's, must embrace the fate of that dark hour. Resolve yourselves apart. I'll come to you anon.
We are resolved, my lord.
I'll call upon you straight. Abide within.
My lord.
It is concluded. Banquo, thy soul's flight, if it find heaven, must find it out tonight.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed listening to that scene. So let's now go back and go through it. So there's a summary that you can read again yourselves if you want. But let's go through the scene. So it begins with Banquo's soliloquy. And here he's saying, he's talking to Macbeth in his mind, saying that you've got what the witches promised. You're now king as well as Thane of Cawdor and Glamis. But he says that I'm worried, I fear that you did something wrong for it. In other words, killing Duncan. But then he says, but actually, the witches said that it wouldn't be your children who would become kings, but mine. And in the same way that what they said to you came true, okay, truth, and verities also means truths, then maybe what they said to me, about me will also come true, and therefore make me hopeful that my children will become kings. And then Macbeth and Lady Macbeth enter as king and queen, surrounded by their followers. And Macbeth says, "Here's our chief guest." So he's referring to Banquo. And Lady Macbeth says, "Oh, if we had left him out, there would have been a missing place in our dinner, and it would not have been a good thing." So they're flattering him basically. And Macbeth says, "Tonight we're having a serious dinner, and I would like you to attend." And Banquo just says in a long, polite, roundabout way, "Yes, of course, I will follow your command. That's my duty. I am loyal to you." So you don't need to worry too much about the line-by-line translation here. And then Macbeth says, "Are you going riding this afternoon?" Banquo says, "Yes." And Macbeth says, "Oh, otherwise, I would have wanted your advice. But never mind, I can wait till tomorrow. Are you going far?" And I mean, the next few lines are just pleasantries, okay? And Banquo says, "Oh, just as far as will take up the time between now and supper. If my horse doesn't go fast enough, I might be quite late by an hour or two when it gets dark." You don't need to worry too much about that. Macbeth says, "You must come to dinner. Fail not." And Banquo says, "I will not." In other words, "I will come to dinner." And then Macbeth says, so at this stage, Macbeth and Banquo are kind of talking on the side, okay? So on stage, Shakespeare is he doesn't give a lot of stage directions. He kind of leaves it to the director, but you should understand that they're having a side conversation here, and everybody else is kind of on the other side. And Macbeth says, "Oh, I hear that Malcolm and Donald Bain, so bloody cousins, have run away to England and Ireland, and they're not admitting the terrible thing that they did, and instead are telling strange lies, presumably implying that he's saying that that Malcolm and Donald Bain are saying that Macbeth has killed the king." But we'll talk about that tomorrow, in addition to some other things, other important things. Off you go and kind of enjoy your ride. And is Florence going with you? Is your son going with you? So he's pretending just to make small talk, but as we'll find out later, this is important because he's going to have both Banquo and Fleance murdered, not just Banquo. He has to have his son killed because he knows that the witches predicted that Banquo's children, in other words, Fleance, at some point, or the descendants of Fleance, will become king. I mean, Fleance does not become king in this play. Malcolm becomes king later on, okay? And Banquo says, "Yes, Fleance will be coming with me, and actually I should be going." And Macbeth wishes him well and all that. Okay, don't need to worry too much about that. And also this bit here, you don't need to worry about. Just saying, okay, let everybody. Now they kind of go back to the other people and say, Macbeth says, "Okay, everybody go and do whatever you want for the time being until 7 o'clock tonight, when the feast will be, the banquet, the dinner." And he's saying, "I'm going to go and just spend some time alone, so that when we have the party, it'll be even more fun." I mean, you don't really need to worry about all this. And then he says, "Sirrah, a word with you." So he's talking to the attendant. Okay, so that's what Sirrah means there. You don't need to worry too much about that. He says, "Are those men waiting for me?" So he's talking about the murderers, the two murderers that he's hired. The attendant says, "Yes, they are waiting." And Macbeth says, "Bring them before us." So now the attendant goes off. So imagine on stage, remember, this is a play. So one of the assessment objectives is about form, in other words, type. So you should always be thinking, how would this look on stage? If you were the director, how would you stage this scene? So now Macbeth goes into this important soliloquy, and he's saying that these two lines here means that there's no point in being king if I'm not safe as king. And then this line here, he's saying that he's afraid of Banquo because this royalty of nature, I mean, the word royalty there doesn't necessarily refer to the fact that Banquo's children are going to be kings. It just means that Banquo is principled. Okay. And also, 'tis much he dares, so that he's brave. So Macbeth is afraid of Banquo because he's principled and because he's brave. But even more so is that he's not just brave, but he's also wise. So he uses his wisdom to guide his bravery. He doesn't do foolish things, he thinks about things. And then he says, he's the only person I'm afraid of, because with him, he says that my genius is rebuked. Now, genius here doesn't mean being clever, although I suppose it could sort of mean that as well. This is a reference to Roman mythology or ancient Roman history coming up as well. So remember, Shakespeare uses ancient Rome as one of his main sources of imagery. So genius in those days meant like a guiding spirit. Okay, rebuked means to tell off. So he's saying that he feels his guiding spirit to be kind of told off, if you like, by Banquo. Okay, and he says, as it is said, Mark Antony's was by Caesar. Now, if you're only aiming for grade 4 or 5, you don't really need to worry too much about this. Okay, if you are aiming for the higher grades, grade 7 and above, you may want to research this a little bit more yourselves. But what I will tell you is that Mark Antony, and this is Octavius Caesar, not Julius Caesar. Okay, whenever you come across the word or name Caesar, you have to be careful. There's two. Normally it means Julius Caesar, but in this case it means Octavius Caesar. Now, very briefly, Octavius Caesar was much younger than Mark Antony. He was only 19 when he started out, but he actually overtook Mark Antony and overtook everybody else around him and became, in many ways, even greater than Julius Caesar, his uncle, or grand uncle, I should say. So this is interesting. We don't know really what Shakespeare's trying to say here, but it's possible that in the same way that Octavius, even though he was younger than Mark Antony, he overtook him. We don't know how old Macbeth and Banquo are, whether one is much younger or older than the other. But the point being that possibly Banquo is supposed to be younger, maybe, or certainly junior, and yet Macbeth feels rebuked by him, feels in a way inferior to him. Okay, even though Macbeth is older and more senior. Okay, so like I say, you don't need to worry too much about that unless you're aiming for those higher grades. And then he says that Banquo told off the witches when they first said that Macbeth would be king and told them to speak to Banquo instead. And then they obviously told Banquo that he would be the father of kings, his sons would be kings. And upon my head, in other words, on Macbeth's head, they placed a fruitless crown. Now, fruitless here means it's not that, I mean, obviously, to a certain extent, Macbeth has got some fruit, if you like, he's become king, but fruit metaphorically refers to your children. So it's fruitless because Macbeth's children are not going to become kings. Barren also means infertile, not being able to have children. And that is possibly true. We know that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth don't have children. Possibly they did have one and it died for some reason. But so both literally and metaphorically, we know that Macbeth's children are not going to become kings. So this is what he's saying here. So unlineal hand. So unlineal. So lineal means line. So line of referring to your children, to your descendants. So no son of mine succeeding. None of his children are going to be kings. And then he says, in which case, for Banquo's issue, so issue means children, I have filed my mind. Now, filed is really short. Shakespeare shortened it from defiled. So defile to means to make dirty. So why do you think he shortened this word? It's probably to make this line 10 syllables to make it iambic pentameter. So remember, this is a soliloquy, and when Shakespeare writes soliloquies, they're normally written in iambic pentameter, 10 syllables per line. You may want to count the syllables in this soliloquy later on. And so for his children, I've killed the gracious Duncan, the good King Duncan. Rancors means bitterness, made my mind bitter, my heart bitter, my peace of mind has gone for his children. And then this is an important phrase here. Eternal Jew, what do you think that means? It means his soul, given to the common enemy of man. What do you think that is? Who do you think that is? It's the devil, yeah? So he sold his soul to the devil simply for Banquo's children. Yeah? So this line here. But then he says, I mean, you don't need to worry too much about translating this line too exactly, but basically saying that I'm going to take fate on. I'm going to challenge this. So even though it's weird, isn't it, that on the one hand, he knows the witches' prophecies have come true because they've come true for him, and that's what made him kill the king. That's what kind of gave him the courage. And yet here he's now going the other way, that he knows that the witches' predictions are most likely going to come true, but he's willing to even fight fate for himself and for his future children. And then who's there? So now the attendant comes back with the murderers, and he says to the attendant, I go over there and wait. And then once he's gone, he talks to the murderers and says, oh, did we not speak together yesterday? Now, this whole speech between Macbeth and the murderers, certainly if you're aiming for the passing grades, you don't need to worry about it. Actually, even for the higher grades, you don't really need to worry about this next bit, okay? We can skip most of it. I'll go through it quickly and just pick out some important bits, but you can probably skip most of the next bit, okay? So basically, first thing he does here is he tries to, I mean, this is referring to some kind of a speech from before. Shakespeare kind of assumes that we know what's going on here. We don't know, and we don't need to know, really, okay? So firstly, he tries to convince the murderers that Banquo is their enemy. And then he goes on to say, are you so a Christian that you're going to pray for this good man? In other words, Banquo, that you're going to take his side, okay? So this is a very strange speech. It's as though Shakespeare thinks that there's been no mention of these murderers or their relationship to Banquo or to anybody else before, okay? And then he kind of goes into this strange speech of comparing men and dogs. He's saying that in the same way that there are different kinds of dogs, there are different kinds of men, higher and lower, better and worse. It's all a bit weird, really, as to what this meant to be for. Basically, if we just carry on down here, he keeps trying to convince them that Banquo was their enemy, and they finally admit it. And then he says here that he could kill Banquo himself, or he could use his authority to kill him or do something to him, but he doesn't want to do that, okay? So he says here, with his power, he could do this, but he doesn't want to because they have friends in common. So Macbeth and Banquo have friends in common, and he doesn't want to lose those friends. And also that they are sad about Duncan's death. That Macbeth, of course, killed, okay? Who I myself struck down. And that's why he's now trying to get the murderers to do the murder for him. And the murderers are now convinced, not that they needed a lot of convincing, actually. And you can see here that actually Macbeth doesn't really care what they think, because this murderer starts to speak and Macbeth kind of interrupts him and says, your spirit shine through you. I mean, he's kind of trying to flatter them now as well. and basically says, okay, I will tell you exactly when and where to go. In other words, where Banquo and Fleance will be. And he's saying it has to be done tonight, and it has to be far away from the palace so that Macbeth has an alibi, okay? And make sure that you don't make any mistakes. To botch up something means to make a mistake. He's saying that Fleance, his son, has to also be killed, so Fleance will be with him, and he has to be killed as well. And then here he says, each of you have to decide whether you're going to do this, and I'll come and ask you soon. And they actually say, we have already decided. And then he said, okay, in that case, I will come and talk to you very soon. Just kind of stay here. Or, stay over there, and then I'll come and talk to you. And then they leave, and the speech ends with a rhyming couplet. It is concluded, Banquo, thy soul's flight, if it find heaven, must find it out tonight. Why does Shakespeare end the scene with a rhyming couplet? So that the audience knows the scene has come to an end, and also the other characters waiting to come on can know. Okay, so like I said, this last bit you don't need to worry about too much. Actually, if we just go back, so there's the summary. Okay, this bit here is important about Banquo, and then this soliloquy about feeling safe and so on, that's very important. But then the rest of this you can kind of skip, really. Okay. All right. So there are some key quotations, and here are some questions. A little bit more tricky than usual as we go through. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this. So a little bit more challenging, but not that much really. So pause the video here, try to answer these questions. When you're ready, you can move to the next slide where the answers are, which I am going to do now. Okay, so there are the answers. And if you've struggled with those, then you need to go back and listen to the video again. And that's the end of that scene. So as always, if you found the video useful, please do subscribe and tell all your friends about it. And I will see you in the next scene.